we wanted to bring forth the current pavement management plan, go over it with an overview, talk about how we got from conception to implementation, and then just have general conversation and as to should we be looking at changing some of the expectations or principles of the pavement management plan. So I have Public Works Director Walter here to give a presentation overview on the pavement management plan.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Daryl and Mark, you'll have to bear with me because you've seen this presentation a few times over the years, that we're putting things into either a mill and overlay, an FDR, or total reconstruction is based on the pavement management plan. So we thought maybe we better start with the pavement management plan to understand it and the expectations that we set at the time that they were implemented, and does it still hold management on our city streets. So this first part of the slide is just going to go through the history, so we start all the way from the beginning. Pavement management plan objectives we'll go through the pavement management plan history. We'll talk about when we implemented microsurfacing and where we're at today and what that's doing to our streets over the years. As of this year, pavement management plan has been in place for 10 years. We started it in 2013. Pavement management plan objectives were to preserve and perpetuate existing city-owned, local, and municipal state aid streets, pavements in a fiscally responsible manner, correct pavement deficiency and slow the rate of pavement deterioration in the system, consider immediate and long-term needs of existing local street pavements, coordinate the pavement maintenance and rehabilitation with utility repairs and redevelopment efforts, provide information for better informed and involved decision-making when it comes to the City Council, especially for 15, and then we updated again in 2021. The pavement management plan utilizes a PACER rating system. The PACER methodology is based on a consistent numeric rating scale ranging from 10 for a newly surfaced street, brand new, to a 1 for a failed surface, such as Eagle Ridge in Mark's neighborhood. Preventative maintenance activities performed on streets with PACER ratings of 6 was the goal and higher, but do rehabilitation activities performed on streets with PACER ratings of 5 and lower. Chip sealing. And as you'll see later on, we switched to microsurfacing of the street. And you can see that's how we set it up originally in the table in the pavement management plan, is whatever the PACER ratings were was kind of where we were doing what type of pavement management. In the pavement management plan, pavement life, I'll get this right, yeah. This is a graph of how pavement life starts out at a 10 and slowly over the around 18 years because of the life of the pavement, not necessarily 4 and 5 range, full depth reclamation in the 3s and 4s, and then total reconstruction, you know, beyond down in the 1s and 2s. But this shows how fast the pavement life, and I got another slide coming up, how fast it drops off, you know, at that 15 to 20 year mark of it. And that's what this 5 on the PACER rate. But when we started pavement plan, if we start out with the chip sealing, we're hoping to do chip sealing. That's what this shaded area shows, where you bring the pavement life back up, pavement, brings it back to new, and then extends life out. So we're not having to do the mill and overlays and the FDRs and the reconstructions as soon. Trying to extend the life out to 25 to 30 years is what the goal was. We divided the city into 7 management areas of comparable size. The rehabilitation projects were chip sealing in that original plan, and we programmed those areas 3 years later in order to seal coat the newly paved streets. So the chip sealing was, you take and hit it about 3 years after it was brand new, and then do it about every 7 years, the chip sealing. As the underlying pavement or stripping was observed on a few streets, particularly Knollwood by Forest View Middle School, And the one that we're fixing this year was Cedar Scenic, west of Memory Wood up to about in between Olive Wood and Oakwood. That really, them were some of the worst areas in town, but then even after that, it started showing up on commercial roads that we had chip sealed throughout the entire city. Stripping has been identified at smaller areas throughout the city. We have addressed, in 2019, we did mill and patch those areas to see what that would do. That was somewhat successful. A lot of those areas that we milled and patched, we're seeing that it's spreading. It's spreading in a way that we didn't mill far enough, wide enough, or long enough in some of those areas. You can see it on some of the frontage roads, like on Edgewood Drive. There's a spot. There's also spots in the residential neighborhoods. I think Connie's neighborhood out of Edmonton, we took and milled and patched a few in there. Well, now they've spread. It's been getting worse. Forward with updating the pavement management plan to discontinue the use of chip sealing. The research available at the time in 2021, we're updating the plan. The next thing that we found in lieu of chip sealing that seemed to be being used pretty consistent around the state of Minnesota and other cities was microsurfacing. It consists of the application of a mixture of water, polymers added to the emulsion. That means is it cures fast. So within about 30 minutes after putting it down, you could drive right across it, no typical operation. This is the truck that mixes the stuff all together. This is the truck in the front feeding it with rock. And then it comes out the back. And the first year, like I say, we started this was 2021, and we did Englewood Drive from Excelsior Road up to Whiter Road, and then we did Clearwater Road from from Kimberly to Englewood was the two stretches of road that we did. It's coming up here. We did it as a pilot project. MnDOT District 3 in Baxter is administering microsurfacing district-wide. They have noticed some stripping though of the microsurfacing, especially if you look at from Donlinger's north on 371, there's a couple spots. So I am still concerned, and that's all in high groundwater area. You know,
So it's not been noticed, or it has been?
It has been noticed.
So that's wrong.
That is wrong as of today. They have got a couple spots, but compared to the chip sealing, it's probably 95% effective compared to the chip sealing, letting go and stripping. But they have noted a couple spots up there. They are scheduling that area to be redone in 2031, a full reconstruction of the pavement from Baxter, Highway 210, all the way to Nisswa, I think it's Highway 18, where the new signal light was put in Nisswa. That is being scheduled for 2031. They are talking about maybe doing one more microsurfacing in between now and then to see if they can get it to 2031, that pavement. But MnDOT utilized, and so are we, where we put down what's called a scratch course first, a first surface layer, which kind of fills in the divots, the rutting in the street, you know, levels it out a little better, and then you put the second course on, which makes it smoother. And it seems to be working very well. It seemed to make the ride smoother on Englewood Drive. I noticed this year now that it's starting to come back, and I don't know if it's because the frost is coming out, you know, and getting some of those dips again. But it has been working pretty well.
What's the time frame between those two applications, or?
Next day, right? They did the scratch coat one day, and they do the second coat the next day. And I think that was the same way they did last year over here on Norway. Brian's shaking his head, yes. We've set the microsurfacing up on an 8-year rotation. They recommended 7 to 10, following any type of rehabilitation or reconstruction, compared to the chip sealing was 3 to 5 years after rehabilitation reconstruction. So it does help us drag it out a little bit further when we start. But I'll be getting to where our problem is because of the boom in the early 2000s is what's causing the problem with the CIP. It's all piled up at one time that the roads are coming due. It's coming up in a couple slides. The goal of the program is to utilize microsurfacing to achieve a minimum pavement life of 20 years in commercial and 25 years in residential right now. We're hoping, we took the conservative route, the residential to 28 to 30, but we're still in the CIP implemented in 2022. I talked about in 2021, we called it a pilot project just to see how it would hold up through the winter and into the spring. Seemed to be very successful with no stripping at all showing at all. And even this year yet, I'm still not seeing any stripping on Clearwater, Englewood, or any of the microsurfacing that's been done today. Do have, shows what we scheduled and did in 2022, and then 2023, it shows what we have scheduled for projects, mainly northwest of City Hall, up in Trevine, Michelle Circle, Bronson, Kelly, Emily, that area. The reason we picked those was because they're all about that 20 years old. We wanted to see how it holds. Back to the 8-year, go back to the 8-year rotation on the microsurfacing. The first road is both commercial and residential. Then it's that have been done, you know, that we're doing mill and overlays on this year, you know, like your area, Connie, we would be scheduling for 2031 to take and do a microsurfacing in that area. So that's how the CIP will show when it comes in, is the reconstructions are based on this, hopefully holding those payments out to a minimum of 25 years in residential, 20 years in commercial. We still kept the same divided areas, because it does help if we can stay in one area, but I don't know if we'll be able to do that in order to meet that 8-year rotation, because our projects were kind of all over the city. But the reason we target one area is it's more cost effective for the contractor to come in and work in one area versus mobilizing to another area in the city. This is what has happened to the PACER rating, 8 or not. That's all in 2, it was 6.56. We've gained a little bit. The state aid is where we really gained, which is all of our collector roads. We were at a 6.05 when we started, and we're up to, I believe that's
6.53.
sorry, this is all the commercial and residential. The purple is all the residential and commercial citywide that is not state aid routes. And we've stayed about steady, 6.05 to 6.53. Where we've really gained, it's tough to see it, is on the state aid collector road system, which is the yellow. It started out at a 5.45 and it's at an 8.09 citywide. So that's above our goal. Well, we didn't really set a goal, we set a target of staying between a 6 and 7. And citywide, we are right about at that 7. Citywide, you look at all the streets citywide, today we're at about a 6.94, where we started out at a 5.89 when we started the program. So we have gained citywide overall. In Parkwood neighborhood and the Winkler Pines Woods neighborhood, that's Mary Charles Street over off of Englewood and Clearwater. And they're the only ones that we did mill and overlay, otherwise everything to date has been FDR or reconstruction. As residential streets age, the 5-year CAP increase in the overall residential street pacer rating with the completion of these projects. The residential street overall average is lowered by these segments identified for sewer and water extensions. The lowest ratings, of course, in the system are the Eagle Ridge area, South Forest View area, Ashley and Welton area, the Lindale area, and then what I didn't have on here is Olivewood area. That's kind of the 5 places left in the city that don't have city water and sewer. The weighted average of local streets held steady from 2019 to 22, as I showed on the previous slides. Increased, from 19 to 22, it did increase from citywide from 6.47 to 6.52. Area 6 accounted for the biggest increase, which is attributed to the street reconstruction and all of that North Forest View area. The citywide pace rating, considering local and MSA municipal state aid streets, shows the system holding steady at about a 6.94. And then we just put this in there that most cities strive that are using the Pacers rating system. They are striving to keep their average condition at between a 7 and an 8. But that's just all over Minnesota, what other cities that are using the Pacer rating. Doesn't mean the city of Baxter has to use it. I just put that fact in there to show what other cities are doing. In an ideal situation, the Pacer ratings would stay consistent over time, from the worst streets being rehabilitated and the new streets aging at a consistent rate within a short period of time. To further complicate matters, the boom was immediately followed by the Great Recession. The city went from completing, that $30 million in streets, water, and sewer to zero in the Great Recession. Neighborhoods currently not served with utilities, there should be a dramatic increase in the Pacer rating. There's not a real good way to estimate that, what that's going to do. 7.5 to a 7.7. A second major factor contributing to the Pacer rating is the stripping from the chip sealing practices that were used between 2014 and 2017. And of course, the example is Cedar Scenic between Memory Wood and Oakwood, which is a residential street that is in poor condition. That's down to about a 4 now this spring, maybe even between a 3 and a 4 on several segments. Stripping is a result of the bond failing between the aggregate and the asphalt. Unfortunately, from the first sign of stripping to the road being in poor condition occurs over a short duration, just a few years. The only maintenance solution that we have found that's been effective is spray patching, and it has to be reapplied on an annual basis, so it starts to be expensive. For this reason, if a street is coming up in the next few years. To maintain a Pacer rating between 6 and 7 based on engineering judgment, the average life of the street has been estimated 25 years for residential streets, 20 years for commercial streets. Residential streets generally receive much less traffic, and even more important, less truck traffic, semis, delivery trucks, garbage trucks, buses, etc. With the exception of the residential construction project areas in town, such as the new houses, the only truck traffic residential streets experience are associated with garbage trucks and buses. After a 25-year lifespan, also you gotta be aware that in our judgment is, after 25 years, we know that the elasticity of the bituminous pavement drastically decreases, starting the process of pavement failing, which is unraveling, falling apart, crumbling, whatever you see out there, that starts creating potholes. In the commercial district, heavier truck traffic and overall increased traffic decreases the pavement every 3 years. So every year we look at the CIP and look at what should be programmed, but then also we look at every 3 years how the Pacer ratings have changed on those segments, along with the age. And what I didn't get to, and I apologize, is I didn't get to the last slide, which is how does this affect the CIP? Well, what the city picks as a goal for keeping the PACER rating at relates back to how much is budgeted on an annual. Then, of course, what really adds in here is every year that we add a new street, adds that cost out there 20, 25, 30 years out, you know, of another mill and overlay FDR citywide of every new street. What we're worried about is that it's gonna be so costly each year that are we going to have to lower the expectations on the PACER ratings citywide? I guess what we're looking for is what's the city council think of the conditions of the roads as today, as you look at PACER ratings right around a 7, acceptable. The one thing that, to go back to the PACER ratings, is that people that we hear from the most, that we haven't changed much, is the residential streets haven't increased much with the program that we've got in place right now. There hasn't been changed that overall ratings on the whole system, because it's such a big neighborhood all at one time, where the streets are very low rated. That's all I have.
Okay, Lindsay, follow.
Has it been the same person? It's been the same person every year, hasn't it? Bolton and Mink has been doing our PACER ratings since 2013. And Brian can answer questions too if you have some. But yes, they have used the same personnel on the streets.
You get commercial streets, some are both. And in other words, for example, when we did Excelsior front of Rennie's, we had a lot of conversation, healthy meetings from the residents about that street. And one of their complaints was that the trucks would go unload at Cub, then they would head down their street because they were going to Pillager or someplace. So they were heading down Excelsior. Water takes the least resistance or whatever. And I hadn't really thought about that until listening to them. And I said, is that a lot? Oh, yeah. I said, the trucks, they're all coming down there. And then you got Memorywood. That's kind of a shortcut east and west. And so the comment that was made, or question that was asked, is can we restrict truck travel on our residential streets? And I don't know that we ever came up with an answer to that.
It's really tough to cut the traffic off. I mean, you can pass the ordinances and you can do it, but then what trucks are allowed, which ones aren't? I mean, it gets to be a patrolling nightmare for the police, for one thing. But it is tough to regulate when they're state aid streets. That's the other problem. We got Excelsior Road, Englewood Drive, Clearwater Road, Memorywood are all state aid streets. MnDOT won't allow us to restrict those because they're supposed to be built to a state aid standard that allows all modes of transportation. So if you're gonna go to no truck routes, you know, then you need to take and restrict where your state aid routes are. So you run into a problem with the state aid system.
And the state aid system funded the upgrades to those streets to handle that traffic, right?
Correct. We use state aid funds for the extra depth of pavement and the over width of pavement.
I think, sitting in their chairs, they're looking at, okay, I'm paying X number of dollars for this assessment on this street. You and me in our neighborhoods paying the same thing they are. There's never a truck on those. In theory, they should last, forever almost in comparison. So I understood the concern
But they pay the same assessment
for the 26 feet.
as the 26 feet,
That's true.
3.5 inches of bituminous as everybody else in the city limits. The only thing I could argue is, are they having to do a mill and overlay more often, every 20 years versus every 25 years in other neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that there's another classification street in here. In Gams, we have residential, we have commercial, but then we have collector streets and non-collector streets. When you look at my street, and that pavement's 40 years old, but it's a dead end.
Yep.
So no one's going anywhere through there to get somewhere else.
Yep. See, where MnDOT doesn't have a commercial classification road, they have either collector roads or local residential streets. That's how they rate. So that's why Memorywood, Englewood, Clearwater, Excelsior, College Road, Elder, Glory, that's why those are our municipal state aid.
State aid roads and the rarely traveled residential road.
Cause then I'll see what you got, Mark, is industrial park roads. So we're building those pretty much as the same standard as any collector road. The one thing that we've done is we went to all of our collector, the state aid funding.
So where I'm a little disappointed in this is a couple of things. I think we've been too conservative with our estimates on how long the roads last. And I think I've been saying that from the beginning. And if you go back to the slide with the ARPA on it, and we're just going to do a couple of, we're going to do two and a half micro resurfaces to eliminate one mill and overlay. I mean, is that really cost effective? And when we first looked at this program, it was
The milling.
what's a micro resurfacing cost?
Micro surfacing is about $24 a lineal foot on a 36-foot wide street.
So it's like my feeling is I think we're doing too much too quick. And I've had people say that to me, that our streets are nice, but, we're paying a lot of money to make them nice, or keep them nice, however you want to put it. Whereas when we first looked at that chip seal and the concept that they were using in South Dakota, and you could literally extend the life of pavement out theoretically forever if you kept adding oil to it every 5 to 7 years.
Yep.
And you started literally the year you paved it, so you didn't lose any out of the system. So it never got to the point where it was starting to crumble.
And that's what I'm hoping the micro surfacing does, but I don't have enough data today to do, will them roads, can I go 3 cycles to 24
Go
and
back to
schedule it
another
for 30
state.
years?
Because the first interaction I had with the public works director here in '92 or so was asking him if they were gonna do any maintenance to my street, like micro resurfacing. Didn't know what micro resurfacing was at the time.
Nope.
But where I came from, that's what was done to the roads, was micro resurfacing. So I mean, there's data out there, it's not Minnesota data, but there's data out there on this process. 0 preventative maintenance. There's been no crack sealing. There's been no micro resurfacing. The only thing that's happened is some potholes in the field. And then when snowplow takes out a section, we haven't participated in this 10 years worth of preventative maintenance for our roads.
Correct, because we made the decision in 2001, that we weren't gonna do any maintenance on anything that needed city water and sewer yet.
Well, that decision was made 30 years
Oh.
ago.
Your road's totally different, Mark, but citywide, in 2001, when we started the first CIP map, 10-year CIP map, we made the decision, which was city council decision, to not do any maintenance, crack sealing on any streets that we're gonna do water and sewer in. We were gonna just do it all at once and put the water and sewer in and get done. The goal in 2000 was to be done by 2010 citywide and have the city water and sewer extended to all neighborhoods that didn't have city water sewer. Well, things come along, things changed, it got extended out, then the Great Recession hits and it stopped. But I do believe, Mark, that one problem we have today is because we made that decision back then to not do any more crack sealing on any of those streets, and by not doing any maintenance, because we thought we'd be done in 10 years.
Spend what?
The deterioration, the number, the pacer rating on your road. You know, you take like Olivewood and some of those areas, if they would have been crack sealed starting in 2000, because we knew that the Great Recession was coming and we weren't gonna get the water and sewer done, I think the road would be in better shape today.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
yeah. The other side of the coin we're not talking about is how expensive it's gonna be to do those neighborhoods, and is if it's worth it or not.
Yep. That's another whole discussion coming with the CIP. Are you gonna do water and sewer or just street? It's a city council decision, it ain't mine. All I can do is recommend and give you all the data in the world. If you think that the city streets will extend out to 32 years in residential by doing 3 micro surfacings, year 8, year 16, year 24, then the mill and overlay scheduled for 2032, I'll do the direction of the council. I'll do that. Right now, I'm not comfortable with what micro surfacing will do on city streets. And there isn't any data out there, hardly at all, on micro surfacing city streets. It's all on interstate highways and trunk highways, both in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Based off of this plan, or the pavement management plan, that laid out a capital investment to around $100 million over the next 10 years. Knowing that we have financial stress in future years, we wanted to have this organic conversation talking about what the goals and objectives of the pavement management plan are. Talk about our assessment, are we to make to this, so that we can step back and re-evaluate the CIP, and based upon the final product later this year to the council and say, okay, we've done the hard work, we've had the hard conversations. Based upon the direction of the council, this is how that looks over the next 10 years versus what we presented to you based upon the current policies in place.
I do know that coming with, and I think the council's gonna be shocked. Some of those streets, I believe that they'll probably be making recommendations of not doing mill and decisions. They're gonna shock the council in the coming weeks.
But that's what we've seen over the last few years, is that very thing. You know, we think it's gonna be a mill and overlay, and then by the time we do it, it's not a mill and overlay anymore.
And of course, the difference between a mill and overlay and an FDR is double. About $108 a lineal foot for a 36-foot wide street for mill and overlay, and $200 per lineal foot for an FDR. And of course, we're 100% assessment, so now their assessments in all those neighborhoods have doubled by not being able to do a mill and overlay. The mill and overlay might need to be done between 15 and 20 years versus 20 and 25, like we're doing right now. To push a bunch of those streets further out, like you say, and make sure that they are down to a 3 and a 4 anyway for pacer rating instead of the 5 and 6 that they're at right now.
And this is a non-engineering question on my part, but, so if we're gonna go to the 3 times, we do soil bores in between to find out if they're worthy of still going, are we confident in the basis? We did things right back in 2000.
That's a good question. I mean, what we found out in Southdale and that Winkler's edition, we ended up, is before, when we go to design, we actually do soil borings every so often, spot check every one of those streets before we design. So it could even change, sorry, go ahead.
If we continue with our crack sealing, we keep water from getting in. base stays good. But when you start seeing that, where do you see the toggles start to see them? Basically, they start on the cracks. You know, Inglewood right now is starting north of Clearwater.
One of the biggest signs that show whether you're class 5 is at the proper thickness, and it showed really good on Foley Road last year, is it's called alligator crack. It's cracking all directions. That shows that your subgrade underneath is not stable enough to handle the loads that you're putting on top of the street. Not the traffic counts, it's the weight of the traffic. Well, Foley Road's been taking that commercial traffic, you know, for westbound 210. 3.5 inches of bitumen. But it was 1998, last year when we tore it up. But we let it go until it was completely shut.
It's from the cheap seats, I'm just wondering before we,
Borings. Do 12-inch borings and see what your bituminous thickness, class 5, and when do you hit the sand. Do soil borings randomly throughout the city. And we do that. We've been doing that since we did the Southdale Mill and Overlay project. We have been doing that. We do the soil borings to see what we got there to work with.
From the non-engineering side of this, I think at our level here, we should talk about the potential of lowering our standards in terms of the pacer rating. If we're talking about, I guess that's the number one thing that we have control of in my mind is, do we want 7s, do we want 5s? I'm biased because my road's been a 2.7 since the day I moved in, and it hasn't caused, I mean, other than trying to get from my house to the next intersection is quite the adventure. But there's a point where, you know, at this point, I don't care if my road goes another 5 years in terms of quality, because it's so low that it doesn't matter. So that's more of the engineering question we'd have to ask, in my opinion, is like, okay, so mill and overlay is half of what an FDR is. There's a pretty simple math equation I'm sure you guys can do to say X number of mill and overlays is not worth it. We might as well let this thing ride out for an FDR, or trying to gain that as much as we can, which I think we're kind of trying to do. But money-wise, it seems like we're probably at a place where we need to just find the areas that we're willing to take lower quality, because we can't afford to have $10 million a year perpetually going into the roads. Or, you know, at that bigger picture, that's part of the equation to why I have been bringing up finding areas of the city where we need to look at density, because we've got massive numbers of miles of road, and the cost is not going down.
We've got 86 miles of road for 8,500 people.
It's probably too much.
It's not good in order to be a sustainable city. I do have the calculation. I'd have to update it. We actually did the calculation in 2015, Zach, when we updated the plan in 2015. The Utilities Commission asked for that, and still made the recommendation of the pacer ratings and stuff the way they did, but it's hard to find that calculation. The only problem is after a while, you can only do so many mill and overlays, because pretty soon the bituminous is so dried out underneath, there's no oil left. It keeps leaching out. So pretty soon you lose your strength of the entire cross-section of the bituminous, the thickness of the bituminous. So, but we've done that calculation in the past, about 8 years ago. So I can sure dig that up and update it.
Well, you know, it's just, I think at that non-engineer level, having a standards saying they want the next assessment.
Streets, meaning collectors, commercial streets, industrial park roads versus residential. I mean, do you have it? Do we break it up? That's why I broke the chart up, to be honest. I broke the chart up to show you, you know, we could split, exactly what Mark was saying, we'd split the system up a little bit more. And you use a pacer rating here, because these are our high traffic roads, and they're the most expensive to do, such as College and Excelsior Road, Isle Drive, Glory, Elder. You hold that at a higher standard, because it's so expensive to redo it. And never broken it out, we just looked at it as a citywide system, all 86 mines. And that might help the CIP, how the numbers work out.
I like that concept.
Well, then you're really not worried about the whole overall number.
Well,
You're worried-
I was putting it out there.
I mean, there's a point at which you can't roller skate anymore, right? And, you know, when we moved in 90, we could rollerblade and roller skate on our street. And it was great. It lasted, I don't know, 5 years maybe. And then the surface goes away. So it's eroding from both sides, basically.
Yours is shot from the bottom and shot from the top.
Yeah.
I think the return on investment is the roads that, for the residents of Baxter, are the roads they use with great frequency, or the greatest population uses of the road. Although we're like in our neighborhood, I think our roads are fine, squeeze, whereas, some of these other roads we're talking about, keep it up there at a 7 to a higher standard. Residential streets can be at a 5.
Yeah.
And people are gonna be, defer the cost of that to some extent.
Again, today is just an introduction or overview of the pavement management program as one component of many components that we'll talk about over the next few months as it relates to the CIP. We'll have future work sessions or conversations regarding our assessment policy and then our debt service related to this, and then we'll circle back and talk about where we are at in the conversation as a whole, and start having the harder conversations, more robust conversations, not hard, but robust conversations as to the direction in which council wants staff to proceed as to relationship to our policies as we try and lay out a CIP. So I know we're approaching the time limit. We're not looking for any specific directive at this time, but know that this conversation is multi-pronged, and we're going to continue to have over the next few months. So
Not looking for direction, but I really like hearing what's out loud, what your thoughts are. I really appreciate that. It helps us a lot. What is city council really thinking as a whole?
Do we get a lot of feedback from the citizens on the road conditions, not just like, hey, we're gonna redo your road, it's gonna cost us much, or we're not, I know that's a whole different.
I would say that 50%, about 50-50. Maybe not that. I still say that we're still probably the 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 doesn't care. 1/3 wants this type of system. 1/3 is okay because of budget. Just leave it down here. It's been pretty steady over the years since I started going to a neighborhood, and it's about 1/3. Yeah, today.
Yeah, but part of that was, Todd Holman made that analogy based on the fact that a third needed a septic system.
Yeah. There's a couple people in your neighborhood, that ended up having to put new septic systems in at the tune of, $12,000 to $14,000 for a big mound system for the water and sewer. And finally, they couldn't hold out any longer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your work there, okay,
I